Hey everybody, welcome back to Black Magic Craft. I have made quite a bit of stuff for Trench Crusade at this point, but one thing I didn't have yet were some simple objective markers. Of course you can just use like a little building or something like that, but I wanted something more specific and thematic. It would be really easy just to 3D print something, or even to just take some cool bits and glue them to some bases. But this is the kind of thing that's fun to make. It's not a highly labor-intense build. With a little bit of effort, you can end up with something really neat and unique. I'm gonna show you how I made these scratch-built Trench Crusade objective markers that I think turned out pretty darn well. I started with some 50mm bases. I don't think there's any rule about what size you want your objectives to be. They can be small 1-inch base items or full buildings. I just thought that this was a nice size. And I went with plastic mini bases instead of something like round wood discs because, well, these are concave, so they will sit better on terrain that isn't perfectly flat. When deciding what to place on these objective markers, large crosses were an obvious answer. They're thematic, easily identifiable as something existing in the Trench Crusade setting, and something that could be scratch built. I used 1/4-inch square stock balsa wood. This stuff is great to have on hand for all sorts of things. I wanted them to look like proper chunky crosses that might be used to crucify unfortunate souls on the battlefield. The square balsa wood gave me a nice chunky look, but it would look bad if I just slapped the horizontal pieces on top of the vertical ones. I wanted them to be flush. You could cut 2 horizontal lengths for the horizontal bar and glue them to each side, but I think a far easier method that will look better and be infinitely stronger would be to make a proper lap joint. This joint in carpentry is ironically enough known as a cross lap joint. The main reason I use balsa wood for this type of stuff is that it's very easy to cut, so doing this joinery is very easy. To do the lap joints, you just need to cut out a chunk of wood that is the width of the stock that only goes halfway through each piece. I did the initial cuts with a little razor saw, and then I could easily pop out the chunk of waste using an X-Acto knife. This is a very satisfying task and will give you a cross that is as close to indestructible as you could possibly hope for using such a soft material as balsa. I made a couple different styles of crosses to keep them looking more interesting in a group. Also took a moment to shave off all the hard factory edges and corners so that the wood looked more like it was rough hewn with hand tools rather than cut in a lumber mill by machines. To make them fit the war-torn landscape better, I cut the bottoms of each at a slightly compound angle so that when I glued them to the bases, they wouldn't stand perfectly upright or plumb, but instead crooked and leaning. Superglue and accelerant was an easy choice for making these bonds. The bases needed a bit more decoration, so I grabbed my bag of foam bricks that I like to keep pre-prepared for these sorts of occasions. Using some globs of carpenter glue, I just did some rough piles of bricks. This wasn't meant to be some sort of proper foundation base. Rather, some bricks from nearby ruined buildings, quickly thrown against the crosses for stabilization by some haggard trench pilgrim. To add a third visual element and to even further lock in that Trench Crusade aesthetic, I made some simple sandbags using air-dry clay. These can be quickly made just by rolling out a worm of clay, flattening it a bit, and then cutting it into sandbag lengths. If you do this, you may find yourself tempted to just drop the clay pieces directly onto your piece or on top of each other, thinking that the wet clay will surely secure itself as it dries, but don't fall into that trap. They won't. They're not sticky enough and will also slightly shrink while drying, so if you stack wet clay sandbags without glue, they will just fall off as soon as they harden. Make sure to use some globs of glue when placing them. I'm not saying that I learned this the hard way, but I am saying that I learned this the hard way, and you should just trust me on this. Once I had the sandbags placed, I used my X-Acto blade to indent little seam lines on the ends, just to make them look slightly more realistic and less like blobs of air dry clay. All of the remaining open area of the bases would be covered with my rough ground mixture that I mixed up ages ago. This is a mixture of stones, black sand, and gray grout powder. The 3 different sized aggregates gives things a great natural look, perfect for rubble. And when I'm doing bases, I like to slop on either carpenter's glue or super glue all over the base and then just dip the base into the mixture. This works great. It will bond a nice solid covering and you can just tap off any excess. At this point, they're ready to start painting, so now's a great time to tell you about this video sponsor, Into the AM. Hey, so I'm sure you're aware of Into the AM, a great place to grab some basics for your wardrobe. Whether you need some graphic tees, some plain tees, some jeans, or some joggers, they've got you covered. But they've also recently added a really nice set of patterned button-up shirts that are perfect for summer. And I say they're perfect for summer because the material that they're made out of is really breathable and it'll keep you nice and cool. They've also got built-in UV protection, which is really nice so you don't get a sunburn. And right now is better than ever to go check out their website and grab some stuff for yourself because they've got an amazing sale going on. It's up to 70% off site-wide. And that discount stacks with my discount of 10% off, so you can actually get up to 80% off. You just need to make sure you use the link in my description to go check them out and do your shopping. You might not believe me when I say that these button-ups are comfy in the heat, but I'm telling you this as someone that is very heat sensitive and often struggles being outdoors in the heat. These are really good for that. Okay, go check them out. The wood crosses were clean and didn't have any glue covering them, so I could get away with hitting them with ink without primer. This would preserve a little bit of the natural wood grain on them, although there really isn't much natural wood grain on balsa wood, so this effect is pretty negligible. I did prime the bases though, since there was a variety of different materials and I wanted that black undercoat for shadows. The rest of the airbrushing stage was pretty straightforward. Just a fast and loose application of some highlights and speed inks. After the airbrushing, I use some light gray with a dry brush to bring up the highlights a bit and make things look sort of dusty. And if it's not clear at this point, the airbrush certainly wasn't required for this paint job. It didn't do anything special. This definitely could 100% be done just with craft paints and a dry brush. The crosses looked a bit plain on their own, but thankfully there's another iconic Trench Crusade element that can be easily applied to things: barbed wire. This is a roll of security or seal wire that I got off Amazon, super cheap. Although you can also get it repackaged as miniature barbed wire from Army Painter, and honestly the price isn't bad, but you do get a lot less of it. When using this stuff, I just wrap it around something to make coils and then glue it in place with some super glue and activator. I find that it only needs to be glued in a few spots, each end for sure, and maybe 1 or 2 spots where you want to make sure it stays down. The barbed wire did look a little too shiny and new, so I took things back to the spray booth and hit the wire with a bit of brown and orange speed paint to slightly tint it and make it look like it had been sitting out on the battlefield for a while. This ended up darkening up the wood crosses even more, which I wasn't super in love with, and I actually think in the future I might try pre-painting some of this wire in lengths before I apply it. The last step was just hitting the bases with a dirty brown and black oil wash, the same one that I've used on all of my trench terrain. These were a fast 1-day build and paint, and considering how simple they are, I think they look awesome. Definitely a great little thematic extra detail to spice up the table and make a game a bit more immersive. I like them because even if you aren't using them as objective markers, they still make great scatter terrain to fill in some empty areas on your setup. If you want to help support the channel and the videos that I make, a couple cool ways you can do that. One is by purchasing some original merch or artwork from me and myself at blackmagiccraft.ca. While you're there, you can also check out my essential equipment page, which links to most of the tools and supplies that I use regularly. Those are Amazon affiliate links, so purchasing through them costs you nothing extra, but does give a small kickback to the channel. Another great way you can help out the channel is by supporting it on Patreon. The donations from kind people on Patreon go a long way to helping me keep making these videos, and I greatly appreciate them, and I'd be happy to see anyone new join up there. That's it, that's all. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time. Cheers.